for every letter of the alphabet, right? Remember this? Is it familiar? Okay. What are we studying right now in biology? Begins with an E. When we talk about ecology, very good, okay? So all of these ideas have to do with ecology. So you were supposed to think of something that began with the letter A that had to do with ecology. So this group thought of abiotic. What does that mean, abiotic?
Abiotic
Is it alive or not alive? Not alive, okay? Because bio means life. That's why we call this class biology, because we study life, things that are alive, living things, right? So biotic means alive. What is an example of something that is alive or biotic? Are you, what?
Cow. Wheat. Cow.
A cow, exactly, okay? A cow. What else? You, Giovanni is alive, right? Okay? How about a plant?
Yes.
Flower? A cell, yeah, we can go really, really little, okay? Good, okay. Now, if we put an A in front of a word, it usually means the opposite, or not. Okay, so if that meant alive, when I put the A in front of it, it really means not alive. Okay? So what would be an example? Well, an animal is alive, isn't it?
Air.
Air is not alive. So that would be abiotic. What else is not alive?
Sun.
The sun, very good. A
Water.
rock, etc. A cloud. Good. I never thought of that one, Sally. Good job. Okay. All right. So we came up with all of these words that had to do with ecology. And what is ecology? What specifically is that in biology? How the rocks and the plants and the animals all interact or affect each other, right? So if I have lots of rain, I can get lots of grass. Or sometimes sometimes if I have too much rain, it'll kill the grass, right? So right now somebody said there's a bunch of flooding in New York. I hadn't watched the news, but okay.
Hurricanes.
Like a hurricane, yeah, the effects of the hurricane. So all of these things affect each other, right? So the sun affects the plant, and that affects the mouse, right? And that's ecology, how all these things go together. So if I have lots of rain and it kills the plant, what's going to happen to the mouse? Kill the mouse. Okay, good. So that kind of has to do with our food webs, too, that we talked about and how they all affect each other. Okay. So today our project is you're going to use your A to Z chart and you're going to make a concept map. Okay? So a concept map is where you put the things, all these things together in an order showing how they're connected to each other. Okay? So what is our theme or our main idea of this? What is all of this called? Begins with an E again? Ecology. So you should probably all start your concept map with ecology. Let's start there. Okay? All right. So what were some of the ideas that we have here? Animals. Great. So I'm going to go up off of here with animals. How can I divide or list things that have to do with animals now? Two? I can go into two groups? Do you remember what are these things called? What are these things called that only eat producers? Do you remember in this? What level? Primary consumers. Okay, so we can divide into primary consumers. Yeah, and then we could do secondary. If they're primary consumers and they only eat producers, what's our other word for that? If you only eat plants. plants, do you remember what you're called? You're not a carnivore, you're an herbivore, right? Okay? So over here we can list some examples of our primary consumers. What's an animal that only eats plants?
Cow.
A cow, a cow. They only eat grass, they do not eat meat. Rabbit, good. Did you say rabbit? I thought you said rabbit. Sin only eats plants, he doesn't eat meat?
No,
Rabbit. Oh, okay. All right. So if you want to add some other words that you don't have on your A to Z chart, you can, but I need you to use all the words that are on your A to Z chart and put them on this concept map, okay? What's an example of a secondary consumer? A wolf, because they only eat meat. A fox. A shark.
Coyote.
Okay, we get the point, right? Okay. All right. So is an animal alive?
Yes.
Okay, so what do we call it if it's alive?
Beyond.
Good. So I'm going to actually stick this in here because I like that we have that animals are biotic, but what else is biotic? What else is alive but not an animal?
People. Grass.
People are animals, even though I know we're a little. Grass. So grass is an example of a plant, right? Or a producer. So do you see how my concept map is working? I'm going up to, this means all of these things are biotic. You'll see. But all of these are biotic also, okay? So I'm going to keep dividing and then maybe listing examples in this concept map.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, it's going.
Okay.
Okay, does this make sense how we're doing this? Biotic means alive. So I could say I have animals, go this way with animals, right? But I could also go this way and now I have plants. So what's an example of a plant? Grass, tree. Okay, all right. So we have other things on here like nucleus. Ooh, where can we put nucleus?
Animals.
Would an animal have a nucleus? Yes. Would a plant have a nucleus?
Yes.
Yeah. So then we need another little, we all need lots of space. We can put nucleus here. And then they can also connect to plants and animals because they're both going to have a plant or an animal. Okay? So do you understand what we're doing? We're going to take these names and put them on this concept map. We've got to connect them with the lines and the circles to show how they're related to each other. Does that make sense? Okay. You understand? Kind of understand? Don't understand? Don't understand? Don't understand? Okay. Let's do this again then. I want you all to start with our main idea, which what we're studying, and it's going to be ecology. Okay, let's try to do some different things on here. We have independent variable. Okay? Is that something we measure, or is that something that we control in an experiment? We control it in the experiment, okay? So I'm going to just go down here and say, alright, but now we need something that, if we're talking about independent and dependent variables, when do we use these? What is that whole process called where we use our independent and dependent variables? Do you remember where we were trying to test? Do you remember we were trying to test if we were feeding the fish too much money or too much food if they died? Do you remember when we did that?
Oh yeah.
What is it? Experiment. Very good, Eva Sally. That was in an experiment. So let's say experiment first, because sometimes we have to add extra things in our concept map to make all of these work. Okay, so there's independent variable. What's the thing called that we measure? Dependent variable. Giovanni, please put your head up. Okay? So if this is something we control, like in our experiment with the fish, what did we control in that experiment? In the experiment where we fed the fish and we see how long the fish would live if we gave them too much food, what did we control? What did the scientists decide to control? The food. Very good. So an example of that is the food. You can think of other things too. Remember when we were trying to grow the corn and we put on extra, what did we put extra? Chemicals. And do you remember the science word for those chemicals? Fertilizer, right? Okay, so we can list some examples of what is an independent variable. Okay? What's the dependent variable? What were we measuring when we were talking about the fish? What did we either count or measure? The number of... Well, we counted how much food they had, but how did we see how long, if the food was going to affect them? We were counting how long the fish, until they did what? We counted the time till they died, okay? So we counted the days that the fish lived. What about in the experiment where we were putting the fertilizer on the corn? What were we measuring? How big the corn was? Or maybe we could count how many pieces of corn were on it, okay? Does this make a little more sense now? Okay, let's get another thing over here. We have quantity. What does quantity mean? The number. So where would we use quantity on our concept map? On the dependent variable, because we're going to count. You know what, Evicelli, you could use it here too, because you're going to count how much food you give them or how much of the fertilizer you give them, and then later you use the quantity to measure how big they are. So quantity would actually go with both. Okay, you see how that works? Does this make a little bit of sense? Yes? Okay, all right. Let's get started. Let's try it, and Mr. Hartley and I will be around to help you. You're going to use your own. You're going to go back into your groups that you used to make your A to Z chart. And then on the back, you're going to do your concept map. Okay? I would use a pencil because did you see how I had to make extra room? Sometimes I had to erase a little bit. So on the back, you're going to start putting in all your ideas. We're all going to start with ecology. Okay, in the middle circle. All right? Okay, so what are you starting with in the center again? What's the circle going to say? Ecology. Very good.
What's the difference? What's abiotic?
And remember, we might need to erase it, so she doesn't want to make it too dark right now.
What's abiotic and what's
And then later we
Which
can
one's-
color
which
it in
one's
with
alive,
maybe
which one's not alive?
colored markers to make it look pretty.
This is not
Okay?
alive, right?
Yeah, you can add some other things that aren't on your A to Z map, but make sure you include everything that's on the map on the paper. Okay? Pueden sumar otras cosas a este dibujo, pero se necesita usar todas las cosas en esta hoja,
Okay.
Okay? Biotic, good. I'd put consumers down there for biotic. What about a decomposer? Would that be biotic or abiotic? Like a mushroom. It's biotic. If it's alive, that means it can grow and it can reproduce. And a mushroom can do both of those things, right? So our decomposers,
Take it off the decomposer one.
and you know what? Let's do those into two separate circles. Yeah, okay. So, do you have an example of a consumer on your chart? Yes? Okay, so let's do a circle here, and then we're